This video provides an overview of the PA CareerLink Community Outreach Center Location Decision Support Map. This was developed by the Center for Land Use and Sustainability at Shippensburg University for Equus Works. We're going to be covering basic navigation and data layers, pop-ups, ready-made maps, how to make custom maps, and also how to do some simple data querying or filtering. So let's take a look first at basic navigation and data layers. When you first open the map, this is what you see. It's automatically centered on kind of the Harrisburg, Carlisle region. And the background that we're looking at is showing us census blocks shaded by their population density. So this helps you to kind of quickly identify the areas of population centers. The data covers most of South Central Pennsylvania, from York over to Lebanon, over to Juniata, and then down to Franklin County. And all of the data sets cover this region. As you zoom in, you'll see that some layers start to appear as you zoom in closer. So for example, at this scale, we start to see Equus work locations and bus stops, as well as estimated service area limits for existing Equus Works locations. Other layers that we have available in the map include transit accessibility and estimated target populations. Other things to pay attention to as you are looking at this map, over here on the right are some quick and easy tools for turning things off and on, for resetting the map orientation. You can also search, so you can search by address or for a particular place. So if we want to look at York, Pennsylvania, it will automatically take us right to the city of York. Over on the left-hand side, you'll also see a number of options. We have layers, which is where we are right now. Under more, you can also go to, for example, legend, and that will help you to interpret what you're seeing. Again, we're looking at CareerLink and community access points that are turned on right now. You'll also see some bookmarks here, and these are kind of ready-made zoom levels that we just created. And as you can see here, you can also add your own bookmarks if you want to bookmark a particular location. For example, if we go back to our search and search for York, Pennsylvania, we can then add that as a bookmark. And then we can zoom straight over to York that away. Okay, we'll get into some of these things on the right-hand side shortly. But what I'd like to cover next is pop-ups. Pop-ups give you a lot of information about a lot of other variables that we pulled together for this map. For example, if I click anywhere in the map, it will outline a census block group in blue. You can see all of the indices associated with that block group. To start out, the first panel shows us all of the basic demographic data related to total population, population density, and average age. This square here for population density corresponds to the colors on the map related to population density. So a very dark red tells you that that is among the higher population density block groups in the map. If we scroll down, you'll see information about population structure, the percentage of minorities, for example, and this includes Hispanic and non-white minorities, the proportion of females, the proportion of young, that's 0 to 19, and the proportion of seniors 65 and over. We have household information, including number of households, household average size, the proportion of female-headed households, and the proportion of renter households. We also have poverty metrics. For example, the median annual income, the unemployment rate, the poverty level, and the ALICE population. One thing to point out here, you may have been noticing these blocks that show up next to some of these indices, and that color coding indicates whether a metric for this particular block group is falling within the top 10% of the observations for the region. So for example, the unemployment rate in this particular block group in the city of York tells us that it's within the top 10% in terms of the unemployment rate. So this block group has among the highest levels of unemployment in South Central Pennsylvania. If it's not highlighted in red, then it is not within the top 10%. We also have education metrics that show us the percentage of folks who have not graduated, those who have a high school diploma or equivalent, a college degree. There's also a pie chart that shows us that same information. And then we have a number of metrics that focus specifically on opportunity youth. That's the population between 16 and 24. For this population, these metrics will tell us for this census block, the proportion of the population in that age group, as well as the dropout rate, the graduation rate, the minority rate, poverty rate, and the households without a vehicle. And then finally, we have the population affected by the judicial system. Next, I'd like us to take a look at some of the ready-made maps that we've included in this tool for quick visualization of some of the more important variables. What I actually like to do when I'm working with the ready-made maps is to remove the population density background layer, because that kind of interferes with being able to see the patterns in some of the other data sets. So to do that, we go to our base map. Now, this population density layer is set as a base map, and you can just select an alternative base map. We'll select streets, which still gives us some geographic reference information, but removes that population density layer. And then if we go here to layers, we can start to look at some of our other layers that are available. For example, one set of layers we have is related to transit accessibility, including distance to bus stops. So in this map, or in this data layer, we are able to see what areas are closer and further away from bus stops. Where it's darker purple, it's closer to a bus stop. And as we move away, it goes into green and yellow to see what that looks like. In terms of the legend, you can see how these different colors correspond to these values within a quarter mile, within half a mile, within a mile, and then further. Also under transit accessibility is the number of bus lines. And this shows us kind of the level of interconnectedness that each location has. Again, if we go over to the legend, you can start to interpret what this means. So areas in yellow, for example, are within a mile of one single bus line, whereas areas in red are within 5 or more bus lines. So those are our transit layers. And then we have a whole bunch of layers here that shows us some quick visualizations of some of the key variables that might go into decision-making about a new career services location. And you can just click them off and on by using the little eyeball there. And what we're looking at here, if we go to the legend, in this case, these are the people that are unemployed within a 1 mile radius. So the way to think about that is that for any given point, the number of unemployed people within a mile of that point correspond to these colors on the map. So this, again, kind of helps you to visualize where there might be hotspots of unemployment or hotspots of poverty or hotspots of populations that fall within the ALICE levels, populations that meet both ALICE thresholds and the federal poverty line, minority populations, opportunity youth, those without a high school diploma, and then overall total population. So again, these maps for quick visualization are ready-made and again, can be pretty useful in identifying hotspots for some of these different variables throughout the region. Okay, to get into a little bit more technical work, you can also make your own maps to highlight specific variables that you might be particularly interested in looking at. Okay, so to create a custom map, we'll be working with this layer right here. This layer is actually connected to a lot of different variables that we pulled together. Right now, it's just showing up as white boundaries on the map. It is block groups for South Central Pennsylvania, which you can see outlined in white. What I might advise is to create a duplicate of this layer so that you can work with a duplicate and keep the original intact. And you'll notice as you click off and on of these layers, this properties menu pops up. So we're going to be changing the symbology. And so we'll go into edit the layer style. And the first thing you want to do here is choose the attribute that you want to map out. And you can see when we click on that add field, there are a number of different variables and attributes here. And we can just pick one to map out. So let's take a look at our opportunity youth. This will show us the proportion of 16 to 24-year-olds within each block group. And if I add that, the next step is to pick a style. And you can see it automatically maps this out here. You can change the theme. I would typically, for these, leave them with this high to low theme, which essentially means that higher values have a more intense color and lower values have a less intense color. You can also pick the type of map that you want. We're going to create what's called a choropleth map, where each block group will be shaded according to its value, but you could show a dot map where the dots are sized according to the value, or a dot density map, or you could even create unique symbols, although with numerical data, creating unique symbols is not generally recommended. If we go into these style options here with the counts and amounts, our choropleth map, you can see even more options for this. So here's our high to low again. You can normalize this field by dividing it, although since this is already a percentage, that's not really necessary. You can change the symbol style, so you can pick a different color. And then you can also change how it's classified. So the default classification method, and what we mean by classify, this is kind of the method that's used to determine these breakpoints. The default method is what's called natural breaks, which is a classification method that looks for natural breaks in the data. You can change the number of classes if you want to. And you also have different options for the type of classification. For the standard, equal interval is one where each, it will automatically calculate equal ranges between each class. You can use the standard deviation, which really helps you to identify outliers in the data, those that are at the very top or at the very bottom of the distribution. A quantile classification where there's the same number of features in each class. And then you can also use manual breaks. I like to use the quantile classification a lot, because when you break it into something like 5 or 10 classes, you know that the top class is showing the top 20% of the data and the bottom class is showing the bottom 20% of the data. Now, one thing that you might be noticing at this point is that with this layer, we're actually not seeing a very good display of the data. And we need to change one more thing in the properties menu over here to the right. So we have been in the styles menu, and we're going to go to properties here. And we want to change the blending option to normal. And you can also set the transparency here. So if you want to see certain things bleed through, you can set the transparency up or down. One other thing that might be useful in the properties menu is toggling on the show and map legend. That way, when you go over to the legend menu, you'll see this pop up. And now we have a map that shows us the proportion of 16 to 24-year-olds in each census block group using a quantile classification. So again, I know that the ones in this color are in the top 20% of census tracts with that population in the region. And again, I can use my pop-ups to gather more information about a particular census tract that might come into play here. All right, the last thing we want to cover is how to filter your data using simple querying techniques. So we'll stick with the example we were using before, where we had created a custom map of the opportunity youth sector using the quantile classification. And let's say we only want to look at census block groups that have at least 2,500 people in them. So if we want to do a query like that, we use the filter tool here on the right. And if we open that up, we want to add an expression. And here we'll say we want to select the total population that is at least 2,500. You can see the map is already updating here, and we can save that to close that map, the query tool down. And then you can see exactly which census tracts have at least 2,500 people in them. And again, you can use the pop-ups here to get more information about individual tracts or block groups. And you can even go back here and maybe bring up information about transit or one of these other variables so that you can see them together. One other thing that you can look at here is you can bring up the table. So these are, in this case, this is the table that contains the records that only have 2,500 people in them or more. You can sort them based on different fields. You can also select records, and those selected records will show up in the map. Okay, so the last thing to note is that over here, all the changes that you've made to this map are really only temporary until you save it. And it's important to do that if you want to keep the custom map that you've made, if you want to keep particular filters in place. Otherwise, you can just close this down and reopen it from the same link. Okay, that's the end of our short training video. If you have any questions, please email us at cluse@ship.edu.